Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Mykela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Mykela. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Before we get into today's video, I want to remind you that Nano Wrimo started on Wednesday, November 1st, and today is the 10th day. So leave a comment below on the word count you have so far. If you haven't written for today, then just leave your word count for November 1st through November 9th. And remember, I'll be leaving my word count in the comments as well because the videos are filmed ahead of time. Excuse me. Now, today is Friday, which is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. If you're writing with me and wish to exchange chapters, then send your chapter with written permission to WritewithMykela@gmail.com. I will post the email address at the end of the video. I am looking forward to reading your chapters, even if I can't read them all on the channel. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. This story is also PG-13, so if you're under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. This story is in its rough stage, just as the last story we heard. The title of this story is Tajiia, and today we are reading chapter 14. If you would like to read along, then send to the email I stated above or earlier and request a PDF of the chapter. Make sure you are specific about either City of the Ancients or Tajiia and which chapter. Now let's start. Tajiia chapter 14, Gathering. When Tajiia landed in the tree with Phaedra and Fannel, there was a lot of commotion in the village. They could hear the huntsmen shouting orders. They could hear doors slam. Then they could hear a loud voice call the others to attention. Several in the trees set a spell to amplify their hearing. The huntsmen discussed the missing people. Someone suggested invisibility, and then several scoffed at that person. Then someone pointed out the tracks heading south. Phaedra was about to panic. Tajiia turned regular sides. I think that's our invitation to leave. Put me on a bird last, said Fannel. My squirrel friend said I need to erase the tracks around the protection stone, and he wants to come with us. Okay, everyone drop your spell, and I will say my spell over you and tie you to a bird, stated Tajiia. Remember to hold on to the bird or feather anyway. We will only fly a short distance because the small bird needs rest. Tajiia only had one bird and a lot of people, so he thought he would need to make everyone extra small. But then 2 more birds landed in the tree. Tajiia quickly confirmed that they would help. Everyone nervously released their spells, and Tajiia extended his small spell to everyone in the tree. It took a while before Tajiia tied everyone on, and the dogs arrived and started barking at the tree. One bird flew out, flew back in. The handlers yelled at the dogs. One of the huntsmen said, "Their tracks just stopped at the edge of the village. Why would they come here and not at least to the stone?" Handler shrugged. "Maybe they can't read it either." "Well, your dogs have treed some birds," stated the huntsman. "Take them back to the empty houses and let them sniff the contents. We will restart our search." They headed back to the village, and a few minutes later, the 3 birds left the tree. The birds didn't stay together, and Phaedra started to panic once more. Tajiia said, "The birds must act as naturally as possible. While different birds might land in the same tree, they don't often fly together as a flock would." I'd say they'd never fly together as a flock, stated Fannel. Look, dear, we're riding a bird, and soon we will be with Tajiia, our new queen. Phaedra smiled to herself, and they flew on. The shadows were stretching as the sun sank lower and lower. The group that changed into birds were landing outside the mountain path and changing back. They glanced around at the people with them, and then they headed in to set things up. Several from Arswea's group had flown up to Tajiia's group. Some came out of form before they landed, and they tumbled. Tajiia's group jumped out of the way of the rolling people. Tajiia was thinking that she gave warnings, but then realized some of these people just joined last night. Bollock skipped up to Tajiia. Tajiia, I was wondering, do you know, or how do you know, when the time is about to run out? I feel the grains dropping, stated Tajiia. Bollock wasn't sure what to do with that answer, but decided to try some spells and see if he could feel the grains. Several that had flown up to Tajiia's group from Arswea's group decided to fly on, so they changed again and flew again. Some of Arswea's group that had flown up decided to stay with Tajiia, including Tokrel and Barrent. Ozzy turned to Tajiia and asked, "If you can fly, why don't you?" "Well, I'm trying to feel things and monitor them," replied Tajiia. "I'm not sure if the thick stone walls of the mountain will interfere with that or not. Besides, we have more witches and warlocks joining us, and I believe the birds are looking for me specifically, and not Arswea or Artur." Everyone in the group nodded their heads to themselves and continued walking in thought. Soon, more from Arswea's group flew up to Tajiia's group. Again, more flew on, and some stayed. Then more flew up. Lastly, Arswea, Artur, and Akel flew up. Right after they landed, another group of 50 birds landed around them. Tajiia stopped and looked at all the birds. Immediately, she knew they were real birds, and she thanked them all for their help. Many needed to go to roost soon, so she helped Tharkek and the other leaders untie people and set them on the ground. Not long after, all the people were normal size, and the 50 birds lifted off and flew different directions. Ozzy, Bollock, and Alla were quietly discussing how they didn't know there were so many witches and warlocks. One wizard near them leaned in and said, "And wizards?" He motioned to several other people. "Not all wizards are the king's men." Ozzy, Bollock, and Alla just looked around at all the people. Tajiia also looked around. "Tajiia," stated Artur, "I believe we need the invisibility bubble until we get to the mountain path." Arswea took in the long shadows, and she was about to protest. "How sure are you that a leaf would float away from the mountain?" Tajiia asked Artur. Stated Artur. He licked his finger and then turned different ways. Tajiia watched with interest. Artur looked at Tajiia. "I believe the wind is blowing from the north, so it would blow a leaf south." Tajiia sighed, said the spell for the invisibility bubble, and continued walking. Artur took a quick look around to make sure everyone was inside, and it seemed everyone was. He and Arswea knew that people needed to rest, but he could feel the anxiousness of the group, so they would continue into the night. The soldiers also continued past dark. They marched forward until midnight, and then they too stopped. But none of the soldiers looked left or looked right, and none of them made a sound except a cough or a sneeze here and there. In the morning, Artur sat up and watched the group, just like he did every morning. Then he thought to extend his eye and look. After a while, Arshwaya came over and sat nearby. After Artur shrank his eye to normal, Arshwaya said, I think Tajiia says the spell to see farther without extending her eye. Artur looked at Arshwaya. Then no one would know she used the spell except her. That's why she was asking for rules, stated Arshwaya. When she extended her eye, Waggler was still Waggler. He hadn't changed shapes or forms because he was still running away. Did you learn what had Chancellor Wycroft so worried? Asked Artur. Yes, replied Arshwaya. Apparently, Waggler was a bee, and a bee dies once it stings a person. How Tajiia knows that is unknown to me. She may have talked to the bees to learn that. There are other animals that sting, stated Artur. Maybe they don't all die, because I could figure out what Waggler was thinking. Yes, except a bee or wasp sting doesn't necessarily kill, replied Arshwaya. People started getting up, and it wasn't long before they were walking again. Artur generally walked up to different people and asked them how they were doing, or he started a conversation to get the feel for things. He realized that he hadn't really done that with Tajiia. So he walked up beside her now and asked, Do you know how many hours or days the soldiers are behind us? Tajiia looked over her shoulder and then said, They are way too close. We need to get in the mountains and put down the tree and help the witches and warlocks that the soldiers shot with poisoned arrows. But I don't know how long it takes to make the medicine. Artur glanced around for Arshwaya. Well, we should be to the base of the mountains a little after noon. How many more hours until the soldiers arrive at the base of the mountains? I think they will arrive at the base of the mountains tomorrow evening when the shadows are long, replied Tajiia. But if they go farther tonight than they did last night, then I don't know. Once we get in the meeting hall, started Raisler, we will have this load time. Maybe that will be enough to make the medicine. Tajiia glanced at Raisler, and Artur took note. Tajiia was more worried about the people poisoned than she was about the soldiers. Arshwaya thought to Artur, First things first. Artur turned and looked at her. He thought, I got your thoughts. How did that happen? Arshwaya thought to Artur, Another advantage of having a cow. She can hear Tajiia when Tajiia speaks softly and says her spells. At first she just tried to catch the words, but then she remembered the spell for better hearing. Apparently Tajiia says a lot of spells, or speaks in witch to herself, but she also speaks to the animals. So a cow thought to change the word Voligear to a name in the group, and she chose my name. They continued thinking together for several minutes, and Arshwaya thought the words to the spell. Then they thought through some other things about the mountain and the preparations they would need. The group of soldiers closest to the northern mountains got up, ate a few rations, and then lined up to march forward. There was no talking among them. But after they marched a little way, they marched through another air wall. This wall shrank all that marched through into the size of ants, because Tajiia remembered that when she was small, she went very slowly, and she forgot they might not want the soldiers to know that. She did remember Balak had suggested it to her. The soldiers were trying not to look left or right, and they were trying not to talk. But when their comrades disappeared, they stopped. Some commanders had also walked through an air wall, and they started shouting orders when the grass was suddenly taller than they were. In fact, the grass was taller than some trees. At least that was their perception. But no one heard them. Then some small soldiers looked up and saw the regular-sized soldiers. To them, those soldiers looked like more than a giant. So the small soldiers also stopped. Tajiia called out, "Thank you, Balak. Your suggestion is working the best." Balak looked at Tajiia and then looked at Varant. Varant shrugged his shoulders. Tokrel looked around. "What suggestion? Are we all supposed to suggest something? Was this a contest or a test?" Tajiia looked over at the chicken woman and said, "Balak has helped me several times with spells for the air walls. He suggested making the soldiers small. Then I remembered that when I was small, I went very slowly." But, started Balak, "you said you didn't know if we wanted the soldiers to know if we could go small." Started Tajiia. "Yes, I remember saying that. But, well, I think the soldiers don't realize everything yet. And they practically stopped. Although the spell is double the normal grains, that isn't long enough. The other thing is, well, soldiers left the village. And they are behind the soldiers behind us. I would hate for those soldiers." Tajiia glanced around. She sighed out her frustration. "Eg hasado pat pex dinam veten redchal alex dinam clayton gothsep e sasado askagur et vado in sergex." "She does speak witch better than human," said Tilka and Tola in unison. They looked at each other and back to Tajiia as Ozzy and Alla glanced at them and then looked at Tajiia. Artur said in a low voice to Arshwaya and Akel, "Did you catch any of that?" "I heard soldiers twice," replied Arshwaya. "Of course, I also heard that in human as well." By this time, the group had stopped and everyone was looking at Tajiia, but several also glanced back to Artur, Arshwaya, and Akel. Phaedra looked around. "Ah, yes. Fanel told me of the soldiers following your group, Arshwaya, and then the soldiers in the village left." "Yes," agreed Barrett. "There were 2 groups of soldiers." Everyone looked at Tajiia. "Say it again, dear," said Akel. "You can say it in witch. Just speak a little slower for us." Tajiia repeated what she said. Most didn't understand everything, but Artur put a few things together and asked, "Are the 2 groups of soldiers only 8 hours apart? We were walking for days." "I don't know how far apart they are," replied Tajiia. "I used an eagle to help me place the walls, so I don't know how long it takes to walk that distance." Artur nodded. He realized that if she had left the original walls up, then the walls would be about a day apart. But apparently she just placed the walls. He looked around and asked, "Can everyone here change to a bird and fly to the mountain pass?" Phaedra glanced at her husband and answered, "We rode a bird here, but Artur motioned. "Let's just keep walking, and we will explain. We don't have time to sit and write things down right now. Arshwaya, teach again, please." So they started walking, and Arshwaya started teaching. Tokrel listened to make sure she had everything. But some of her mind was on what she wanted to suggest to Tajiia. Barrett paid close attention because he realized Tokrel had split her attention. After some time, Tokrel said to Tajiia, "What about all of us changing to a bird or riding a bird and flying far away? We could leave King Pomodestone's kingdom and never return." "What about the innocent people?" asked Tajiia. "How do we get more witches?" She glanced at Rodcast and Balak. "Or warlocks?" She motioned to Rodcast. "His parents aren't here, so..." "That's correct, Tajiia," said Arshwaya. "Not all witches and warlocks are born to witches and warlocks." Artur added, "Some people say that all people are witches and warlocks, but they have forgotten, and under King Pomodestone it is illegal. Still, the question is, why not just leave? And I have many answers for that one. One is, I have traveled far and wide, and there are good people and bad people. Before King Pomodestone, life may not have been perfect, but it was good. Also, what happens if you get somewhere where there are no bad people or kings, but then someone betrays, or a new bad king takes over? Arswaya put her hand on Artur's arm. Artur said he had many reasons, and they are valid. But I ask you, what is our primary purpose? I don't think it is to hide or run away. We are to live in harmony with our fellow brothers and sisters, including those that Tajiia called innocents. If we leave, King Pomodestone will not believe it. He will find someone and accuse them of being a witch, wizard, or warlock. Tokrel sighed. Yes, I see your points. I was just trying to suggest something to Tajiia, something that would last longer than 8 hours. I will keep thinking. We are near the mountain, stated Artur. We should be there in an hour or two. Let's pick up our pace if we can and get the mountain ready. Everyone picked up their pace. Several thought of leaving the area forever, and that did sound good, but they knew they could learn more magic than they ever dreamed if they stayed at least a little longer. Okay, writers, that is the end of chapter 14. It seems that all in the witching community who wanted to gather have gathered, and they are all now to the mountain or almost to the mountain. What did you think of Tokrel's suggestion? Would you think to leave the area and not return? Before this king, the people, all of the people, not just the witching community, but they would go from village to village and visit or move. But moving to a whole different area may be more difficult. Think of moving to a different city in the United States, Houston, Dallas, or Houston, Miami, or something. Okay, so there's still going to be some differences, and you still have to get used to where the grocery store is and all that stuff, where your neighbors are, who your neighbors are. So it's a little difficult. But now, so that was the village to village. Now think of moving to a different country. So we're talking about, Toronto, Canada, or London, England, or Paris, France. In Paris, France, they wouldn't even speak English. So things would work differently in the different countries. And once you move, you would be an outsider, at least for a little while. So those are kinds of considerations you can think of when you're thinking of leaving the area. So leaving the United States, or, leaving the North American continent or something. So it would be different if you went to the Asia continent or South Africa or South America. It would be a totally different experience, and it wouldn't be quite as easy to move to a different area as opposed to a different city or village. I've spoken to you about perspective many times, and today I would like to point out that Phaedra was nervous about the birds splitting up and about the soldiers finding them in the tree. And maybe Fennel had some of her fears as well. But as soon as they were flying away, he was exclaiming, "Look, dear, we're riding a bird." You felt his happiness. Yes, there's still soldiers to contend with, but while he was riding the bird, he was enjoying it. What about Tokrel? Her perspective was that she wanted to make sure she had all the words to the spell correctly, because that's important. But at the same time, she wanted to suggest something to Tajiia. She took that as being a contest or a test. So she has these two things. You can say she was somewhat torn as to where to put her focus. All the different perspectives make the group and the dynamics in the group. If you had only one perspective, then you would only need Tajiia in the story, and none of the other witches or wizards And actually, I've grown quite attached to several people in this story, and I hope you have too. Leave a comment below on who is your favorite character so far in this story, Tajiia, and do you know anyone in your life with a similar personality or perspective as one of these characters, like Shaful? Okay, she decides, okay, we need to picture these things, let me draw them, and she's capable of drawing. So that's her perspective, because somebody else asked her, your drawings are great, but I wouldn't think to draw now. You know, so you have those different perspectives there. And then, of course, Wagler thinks, you know, the big elephant is the best shape to take. And somebody else is thinking a horse is fast. So you have all these different people thinking of all these different things. So I want to know your favorite character in Tajiia so far. So leave that in the comments. And visit my website, bymykela.com, and read some character bios. Leave a comment on which characters on the website are your favorite so far. Tajiia is not on the website yet. I hope you enjoy writing your stories as much as I'm enjoying writing mine. Don't forget to share your stories by sending them to WritewithMykela@gmail.com. That's the chapter exchange part. You share your chapter with me, and I share my chapter with you by reading it. No polishing required. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and the bell so we can continue to write together. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mykela with Write with Mykela. Bye for now.